Jonathan,
Yeah.
let's talk about tech history.
Yes, this week is November 15th to the 21st. First off, we have the dawn of the microprocessor.
The dawn of the microprocessor. This is 1971, huh? This is when, didn't we talk about the Intel 4004 before?
I feel like we have, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very familiar. It looked like one of those. Oh, yeah, well, here they are. It looked like one of those roaches with a bunch of legs on it, almost like a centipede or something.
Yeah.
And that's where this is you remember in our last episode where we talked where we fixed our file server
Mm-hmm.
and the processor that's in there?
Yeah.
That's essentially what these started off as. And so instead of getting the processor where you just drop it into a slot and then lock it in there, essentially you would solder it with those legs that are coming out of it. And so that used to be the connectivity portion of it.
Wow.
But yeah, they've come a long ways. I mean, these are pretty small. These are pretty small processors, or as they call them, integrated chips, ICs. I think they used to call them. So the 4004 was basically a calculator engine.
Okay. So it didn't do that much, but still processing stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think most of the processors, that's essentially what they do, is they calculate numbers based on binary bits. And so based on the results, that's what gets translated back to the computer and stuff. And so that's essentially what all the processors are. They're just gates of, true and false gates, essentially. And you take that and you interpret it into something else.
Wow.
But 1971, the dawn of the microprocessor.
Cool. Next up, we have November 16th, the vacuum tube invented.
Man, the vacuum tube, huh? This is some pretty old stuff here.
Wow. Called it the oscillation bell.
First example of vacuum tube. Vacuum tubes would form the basis of electronic technology for nearly 50 years until the development of the transistor. Fleming's invention has been described as one of the most important developments in the history of electronics.
Yeah, I would say so too. A lot of people use vacuum tubes.
Yeah. I wonder, it would be interesting to see how vacuum tubes took on the form of what the microprocessor or the transistor became,
Yeah.
Like how did they go and translate these vacuum tubes into what the processors are today? I think that would be pretty interesting to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should probably do an episode just on this one day.
Cool.
So that was 1904, the vacuum tube. And then what is that? 66 years later was the integrated chip, which basically replaced the vacuum tube. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Steve Jobs writes a letter.
A love letter?
Maybe.
Let's see what he wrote.
The Macintosh Labs asking for the rights to use Macintosh as the brand name of Apple's still a development computer. Wow.
Macintosh. Oh, wait a second. So Macintosh was a different company? Is that what I'm understanding here?
So it's Macintosh, maybe the Macintosh Labs. And then Steve Jobs wanted to make it Macintosh.
It's like McDonald's, right? But it was
Yeah.
Macintosh.
Macintosh.
So Steve Jobs writes a letter to Macintosh Labs asking for rights to use Macintosh instead of the brand name of as the brand name of Apple's still in development computer. Macintosh, like McDonald's,
Yeah.
Macintosh. Macintosh Labs makes high-end stereo equipment. And while Jeff Raskin, creator of the Macintosh project, intentionally spelled the name of the letter A to differentiate Apple's computer from Macintosh audio products, Apple was denied the trademark because the name was phonetically identical. Okay, so it was spelled Macintosh, but it was pronounced Macintosh.
Got it.
And so it would be McDonald's. So Macintosh Labs was later, I guess, renamed to Macintosh with MAC instead of MC. Interesting.
Yeah.
Gordon Gao, president of Macintosh Labs, visited Apple's headquarters for production demonstration after receiving the letter. However, Macintosh lawyers advised Gao to reject the request until it wasn't until March of 1983 that Apple secured a license for the name Macintosh, MAC. In 1986, Apple wholly acquired the trademark for an undisclosed substantial, and that's in quotes, amount of money. So they paid big bucks for the name Macintosh. Apple did not create the Macintosh computer. They actually bought it from Macintosh MC, Macintosh Labs. Interesting. I didn't know about that.
Wow.
That's kind of cool. It took them a whole year to get that done. Fascinating. Moving on.
All right. Next up, we have November 17th, the computer mouse patented by who, though? I feel like it's just a mouse.
Oh my gosh. This looks so archaic.
It's literally a brick.
Tell me about it. Douglas Engelbart received a U.S. patent for his XY position indicator for a display system, more commonly known as the computer mouse. Wow.
Wow. It was just called a position indicator.
Yeah, that's all it is. So the mouse was first prototyped in 1964, but wasn't demoed until 1968. That was 4 years, and was not included with the commercial computer into the Xerox 8010 Star Information System in 1981. Apple first bought the mouse to a personal computer with the Lisa in 1983. However, the mouse did not become ubiquitous until 1984 when Apple's Macintosh popularized the device.
All right.
That's pretty cool to know. I mean, who knew about that? It was 1964 when it was prototype. It was demoed in 1968, but they got the patent in 1970. And it wasn't another 14 years before it became ubiquitous. Wow. I wonder if they got any money for that, or if it was too late. They're like, yeah, no, dude, you're too late. It's like great invention, but you're just too late for it. So cool.
Yeah. The mouse. November 18th, the telephone gets a push.
Ooh.
Bell Telephone offers the first electronic push-button telephones to customers in Carnegie and Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Wow! Instead of the dial, like a little round rotary phones, it's a push buttons.
What's funny is that we just mention Carnegie for the Hubble telescope.
Oh, yeah, huh?
Yeah, Carnegie's just everywhere. I wonder what that name. I wonder if it's just like a bunch of satellite universities or is it a program within the universities? That'd be interesting to know. But it was interesting because when you had the dial on the phone, every time you would dial, it would open up a path. So if you dialed the area code, it would open up a path to that area code. And then when you dialed that first number, it took you to a certain section of that area code. It could have been the county, the city, something. And then as you press the second button, as you dial the second button, it would narrow it down to the specific area, right? So it would bring you down to like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 blocks or something of an area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last 4 digits would be the actual number of the person's number of, the person's telephone. Mm-hmm. Those were the last 4 digits. Now that doesn't apply. That doesn't even exist. But back in the days of rotary, as you're dialing, you were opening up paths to specific areas. So you started with the area code, then you went on to the actual city, and then down to the neighborhood, and then down to a set of blocks. And those first 3 numbers of a telephone, once you got past the area code, were designated to like the next 1,000 houses. And that's where the numbers would go. And it was very common for your neighbor to have the first 3 digits that you had on your phone. And then it would just be like 1 digit off on the last 4 digits.
That's funny.
And yeah. No, that's exactly how the whole telephone industry started. Mm-hmm. And when they went to push button, I think that's when that whole system started going away. They're like, yeah, and it doesn't matter, that we're not using that technology anymore. So, and then now it's like you can have a 626 area code and live in New York, and mm-hmm. people can just dial you up anywhere over the internet. So,
cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
All right. Next up, we have November 19th. Amazon ignites the Kindle.
Whoa, you missed Nintendo.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Releases the Wii.
Amazon releases a Wii? Wait a second.
Yeah, the Wii. That was...
Nintendo releases the Wii. This is November 19th, 2006.
Yeah.
Didn't you guys have one of these?
We had all of them. Yes.
That's right. I forget.
We had it along with the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360.
Yes. I remember that Xbox 360. How many times did we take it back?
Oh yeah, they got the red ring of death. Oh man.
Why would that happen?
I don't know. I think it was just good old Microsoft. Just kidding. I don't know. Something with the power or something. It was like overheating and then it would just die.
Interesting. So this was the 7th generation game console.
Wow.
How did this compare to the previous ones?
I think with the Nintendo Wii, they marketed towards it was the first kind of like step towards like actually, I don't know, being active and moving around to play the games. Like the other ones were just like controllers, you just move your fingers. With the Wii, it was like you moved around your hands a lot more instead of just pushing buttons. Yeah, I think that's how it got to be so popular. And now they have the Switch that also kind of does the same thing. And yeah,
I think one of the big sellers of the Nintendo products, you'll notice that they don't have high-end processors like the Sony PlayStation, right? Mm-hmm. And even for that matter, the Xbox, any of the Xboxes, they had some pretty high-end processors. Even if you had a Celeron processor in the Xbox, or if you had some mid-range or high-end range Intel processor in the PlayStation, in the PlayStation, the Nintendo consoles always kept their graphics simple, and their processors were very like low end power processors. But I think where they excelled was getting the whole family involved, creating
Mhm.
games that the whole family can play, right? Because it was hard to, I never was able to get into the first person shooter games. It was
Mhm.
just too complicated, and I would get dizzy and seasick, and I was like, whoa, there's too much moving here, and it wouldn't work for me. But Nintendo created bowling, they created golfing, they created race cars, with the little go-kart racing.
Yeah.
So it was something for the whole family. Where PlayStation, I think Microsoft tried to do some family gaming, but it wasn't very successful. It wasn't enough. It was too much of a machine to try to meet family level gaming. It was too powerful. And I'm not saying that it was one of the most powerful machines. I was just saying it was too powerful for that, to keep the game simple. And it always, even though it competed with PlayStation and Xbox, it didn't have competition for its types of games, and they were all family targeted games.
Yeah. I mean, like anyone could play a Wii game and they always had like similar characters. So it's kind of a little bit more familiar.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah.
that's right. Yeah. Ever since they their first version of Nintendo, they always had Mario, and
Yeah.
they had one of the other ones. They always had Donkey Kong on there.
Mhm.
So you always knew who was who. That's true. Yeah. They always kept it familiar. They kept it. That's cool.
All right. November 19th, Amazon ignites the Kindle,
Yeah. So Kindle.
the first ebook reader from Amazon.
So when Kindle first came out, this thing, it didn't do a whole lot other than just download books so you can read them. But this thing was like $400.
Wow.
Yeah. The nice thing was that the battery lasted for weeks. I think, no, it did.
Yeah, that sounds crazy though. But
It
like,
does. Yeah. Yeah. Because all you really needed to do, all it needed to do was use the energy to write to the static screen. It
mhm.
didn't need the energy to keep the static clean, the static content on the screen. It was, I don't know how they did it, but it didn't need the energy, or if it did, it was very low energy. And so it was kind of cool because it was like paper. It was literally, they were trying to replicate paper. So
Mhm.
it didn't have a background light. If you wanted to read a Kindle, you had to bring your own light and light up the screen in order for you to be able to read it. So it was literally like a book, but you had the digital aspect of it, where you can jump, you can search, you can do different things with it, in order to find different parts of the book that you needed to get to. You can create bookmarks, you can create notes. There was all this functionality that was built in that really did help, like, continue to promote its, I guess, evolution, you can call it.
Yeah.
And now you just download the software, the Kindle software, um, and use it anywhere. You can use it on a laptop, you can use it on your phone, on your tablet, or you can actually buy a Kindle itself, and it's just another tablet. It's a Fire tablet, essentially.
To me, I feel like the Kindles were like the start of tablets kind of thing. Like they kind
Yeah,
of got people used to them
yeah,
and
yeah. I
use
totally
them
agree.
for.
Totally agree. It's funny how they called it the Kindle.
And
I
it
wonder.
didn't have a light.
I mean, when you kindle something, right? It's like kindle love, kindle a fire. It's
Yeah.
like it's almost like you're igniting something, right? You're creating a kindle. And like, where did the word Kindle come from? It's
Yeah.
like,
I don't know.
it doesn't even match the name. It's crazy. But everybody knows it as Kindle now.
Mm-hmm. All right, next up, we have November 20th, Windows 1 ships.
Windows 1, man, oh man. Yeah, I think we talked about this. Remember where Windows 1 was just a shell that would launch over the command the command window. So you just like you open up your terminal, that was your computer before. It was just a terminal. And so when they created the Windows shell, it wasn't even an operating system. It was just a Windows shell that would launch on top of your terminal, and you would get Windows, to work with. But yeah, I mean, it didn't do well. Windows 1 didn't do well. Windows 2 didn't do well. It wasn't until Windows 3 and Windows 3.1, and even more so Windows 3.11, that it actually took off. And Windows 3.11 was when networking became a thing. This was still before the internet, or right around the internet era, right when it started. But that's when networking came into play, and so that's when they were trying to get stuff to work. But it was, I think the biggest thing that ran on Windows was Wolfenstein. I was like, and you didn't even need Windows; it just ran off your terminal. But it's funny how they called it vaporware, because I guess they didn't really think that it wasn't worth. I mean, it didn't really do anything for you other than just give you a file system. That's pretty much what it came out to be. So
cool. Yeah. All right. Last but not least, November 21st, the birth of the internet.
Whoa. So this is when, what happened here?
A little less than a month after the first test message was sent, the first permalink on ARPANET is established between UCLA and Stanford Research Institute.
Oh yeah, that's right. So this was the internet in 1969 was actually the ARPANET. And it was basically the universities connected to each other.
Yeah.
And so you can go. So this was, now, if we go and ping Google, what would happen is that we would actually get an IP address back. So back in the days of the universities, you actually had to type in an IP address. You couldn't just type in UCLA.com, because that didn't exist. The whole names of websites just didn't exist. So you actually had to know, like, hey, what's the node for UCLA and what's the node for Stanford Research Institute? And they would give you that IP address. And that IP address is what you would have to plug in, and you would connect to their service. And so whatever service they had going, you would indicate, okay, I'm going to connect SSH. I'm going to connect to, I don't know, to, one of the discussion forums, or, something, but it had to be a port that you connected to, and everybody was able to see the connections, and you can talk to each other and stuff. Now is just super complicated, but it's all based on the same technology.
Crazy. Yeah.
The birth of the internet. I guess if they say this is the birth of the internet, would this be like literally the internet coming out of the womb? And then in 1991 through 1993, that would have been like the adolescent to, no, it would be more like teenage to adulthood age.
Yeah.
For the internet, because they had to grow it. It had to evolve into what it's today. Interesting. So it was 79, 89. So it was like 20, 24 years, 25 years, 24 years later. No, 23, 20, 22 years later.
Mhm.
That, no, hang on. 79, 89. Yeah, yeah. Because 90, 90, 91, 92. Yeah. It was like 21, 22 years later that the internet actually grew up and into adulthood. And that's when it became a commercial product.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Interesting look at how the internet evolved.
Yeah, that's the last thing on our tech histories this week.
All right. Well, until next time.